Hello, and welcome to The Alt Left.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Alt Left. Today we are recording on January 27th, 2021. Glad you're all here with us again on another nice Monday. With me, as always, is Matt.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back.
And the good Reverend Dr. K.
Good evening, everyone.
Today we're going to be talking about social media and news bias and how it affects political will in reality. These are important topics. I don't think anyone, no matter how you feel on this, whether you're right, left, center, if you think social media is the devil, if you think it is the greatest gift of mankind, no one can ignore its impact on what happens in our current day events, what happens in our politics, what happens in our daily lives, and even in our families and personal lives. And it's important to keep track of where we're getting our information. Is it vetted? Is it good? Are we in an echo chamber? Are we doing our own research? Because the information we bring in and our willingness to vet that information controls our thought patterns. And remember, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. All right, boys. So let's go ahead and wrap it up. Facebook bad, and that's a wrap. Let's put it in the can. How do you feel about that?
I mean, you aren't wrong, but it's a little bit more than that. I mean, when we're talking about media, a lot of people hear the word social media, and right off the bat, they're going to think Facebook, absolutely, there's issues going on with that. But then we've also got, some bigger problems going on, like it's not just Facebook, right? It's not just social media. It's all media. And I know, bear with me, because I know that's a very, in a lot of ways, it's a very Trumpian take right now, but it's also correct. We have a problem with news media in this country in addition to social. And I think that's what we need to talk about first, and before we even get into that, I think one of the biggest things that needs to be said is that the way people consume their information, which, let's be honest, that's what media is, especially news media, that's consumption of information. There's gaps in it. There's problems in it. I think a big reason why we can't even agree on simple facts anymore is because people don't know how to critically think. And I think the good Reverend Dr. K is going to help us learn why. Is that right, Dr. K?
There are some barriers that people have to basic critical thinking. And just really quickly to go over them, they're egocentric thinking, group thinking, drone mentality, social conditioning, biased experiences, schedule pressures, and arrogance and intolerance. And I actually think that there's two or three that are really important in relation to our media, our social media, and how we vet the information that we're reading, what we're consuming. The first is the egocentric thinking. And egocentric thinking is basically that you have a tendency to view everything in your life and around you in relation to your own self. That makes sense. We all have our own experiences. We all have our own thoughts. And when you see something on social media or in the media, you generally think about it in terms of how does this affect me? That's not necessarily wrong, but it can definitely be a barrier to thinking about it in a more critical manner. So the next thing is social conditioning. And social conditioning basically says it's your ability to look at things outside of how you've been conditioned to look at those things. So if your entire life somebody tells you that the first thing you need to do when you get up in the morning is A, you're going to always do A. And what you really need to do is look at A and go, okay, well, I've done A. Maybe now I need to also think about doing B. And then biased experiences is the third one. Those biased experiences, that really goes back to the first one that I was talking about. Egocentric thinking is that our egocentric thinking is biased by our experiences. Things that stop us from seeing other viewpoints or other information because we have a certain experience that tells us that this is how things are.
So you get things like there's a snowball here, so that means global warming isn't happening, right?
That's exactly right. That is biased thinking. Those other barriers are all good and they're all very valid. But in this context, I really think that these three things are really the heart of why people don't go and try to read multiple media sources about the same event. Why somebody who sits and watches Fox News all day doesn't go and look at ABC News or MSNBC or BBC. They just continue to watch Fox News.
Yeah.
And it's because they like the format, they like the bias.
Well, there's a comfort in it. If you watch the same newscasters who you trust in the same channel, the same format, there becomes a comfort factor to it. And I mean, you're 100% correct. That is our issue. And I think that stems because we're evolved for that. Human beings are not evolved to be critical thinkers. Critical thinking takes time, it takes energy, and it takes away from making snap decisions. And snap decisions are not good with politics or political beliefs, but they're damn good when you're getting chased down by a rat, or a tiger. When you're in life or death situations, judgment calls based upon a voice that you know and trust and are familiar with is far more important. We are tribal by nature. And unfortunately, like you're saying, Kay, it seems that we just can't shake that piece of evolutionary garbage that makes us that way. It's so ingrained into who we are. I mean, let's be fair. What are we, 10,000 years out of the cave?
Well, and it's what kept us safe for centuries. The guy who went outside and got eaten, well, guess what? You don't go outside.
Well, and the guy
especially at night.
And especially if you're out there and you hear your buddy say, hey, get over here, there's a tiger over there. If you go like, well, I don't know. Let me see what somebody else has to say. And let me take a good long look. No, you're going to get eaten. But if you know that your friend Kay said that and you trust him and you know him, it is advantageous for you to listen to what he says in GTFO. But unfortunately, once your species evolves to have television, that translates to watching Fox News and going, well, I know Sean Hannity. I like what he has to say. I do think socialists and brown people are scary, so I'm going to listen to everything he has to say all the time, and I'm going to trust that as fact, and I'm going to simply accept it.
Well, and it's worse than that even. It's the lie that somebody put online that your cousin, Billy Bob, decided to repost, who was picked up by another person, and so now you've seen it 2 or 3 times by multiple people who you may trust or who you may know personally, and it's still wrong.
Well, and look what we just had in this last administration, right? We literally had Trump and Fox News tweeting and announcing things and referencing each other. Like Fox News would say something, and then Trump would be like, well, I've been reading a lot about the Bowling Green massacre. And then Fox News would be like, even the president says this is true. And it's like it was this circle jerk between the White House and the conservative media of them quoting each other and referencing each other as credible sources.
Yeah.
With no meat.
That's exactly right.
And that's a big problem. And it goes everywhere. Like, I mean, even with COVID, it's this whole thing about my worldview says this. Oh, I had a cousin who got COVID and he was over it like a day. Well, yeah, we know already that people can be asymptomatic with COVID and still spread it. But because they know one person that was asymptomatic, they think it's no bigger than the flu. And then, of course, they go on right-wing news media, and the right-wing news media reports that it's no worse than the flu. And then the president of the United States goes on, live television and says it's no worse than the flu. And so it's this weird echo chamber that just keeps going, in a circle almost of reinforcing bad ideas. We talk a lot about the right, but especially since we've started this podcast, it absolutely happens on the left too. There's plenty of people on the left that fall into the exact same trap. Liberals especially, but even people on the far left. I've dealt with people calling themselves progressive that fall into these traps as well. And so one of the things we wanted to discuss here is what are good news sources, how you can check and verify your news sources and facts, and what good resources there are for that. And then also kind of discuss the differences. And this is a big one because I can't count how many times somebody has shown me an opinion piece as verified facts of what they were saying. And so with that said, let's start with the most reliable sources and why. I will try to put some of these links that we're talking about into our description so you guys can click them and have them available to you. So the first thing I want to talk about, there's a graphic that's been circulated. I've seen it on, I don't think I've seen it on Fox, but I've seen it on a lot of the more centrist ones, CNN and a couple other places that they reference. And it's called the media bias chart. And you can go to adfontesmedia.com and I'll put that link in our description and you can find it. And what it is, it's an independent resource that essentially aggregates all the news sources and media that are out there and puts them on this chart, basically lining them up on how trustworthy they are versus how left or right they fall. So it's basically like a graph going up and down. On the left-hand side, you've got the most factual reporting at the top with the least factual at the bottom. And then going left to right, if you're right in the middle, that's basically the center, the people that are truly the non-biased reporting. Okay. And then if you go left, you're going into, of course, the left wing. If you go right, you're going to the right. It's a great resource for learning which news sources are the most biased. And again, I will put this out there. Fox News is decently close to the middle. Like, I'm not going to say it's the most middle, but it's up there. And there's a reason for that, because if you actually go to foxnews.com or actually go to regular local Fox News affiliates, you will get factual reporting. Shows like Sean Hannity and Fox and Friends, those aren't really news. Those are entertainment, and we'll discuss more about those as we go along. But just keep in mind that this is a great resource. Even some of the more right-wing places that you're familiar with do have factual reporting you can trust. But it's important to not just use them and them only.
Also, I want to bring in here that I don't want to be seen as just picking on Fox News, which, don't get me wrong, they deserve it. They're bastards. That division of news versus entertainment doesn't only apply to them. For instance, if you want to talk about a live running newscast, whether it's the 11 o'clock news on a local station, which I don't really recommend, but that is legit current news. If Wolf Blitzer is giving a report on CNN midday, that's legit news. And even if you're watching Fox News midday, even if they're putting a bias on it, they are actually reporting headline news. It's typically in the evenings, but also in the mornings too with the Fox and Friends. But whenever you get into these are all entertainment shows. You know, whether we're talking about Sean Hannity, whether we're talking about, even when Bill O'Reilly used to have the O'Reilly Factor, we're talking about, you know, people I really enjoy like Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon. Rachel Maddow. Let's look at Rachel Maddow. She's fantastic. She is a certified genius. She's a Rhodes Scholar. Rachel Maddow has some of the best journalistic chops in the industry, but her show is an entertainment show. Now,
and it's still riddled with opinion.
Yeah, now I trust her not to
lie to me.
Which
is fine.
She will have good reporting, but it will be incredibly biased, and it is not going to be current headline news. It is going to be handpicked things that a respected journalist has decided to editorialize about. And that's true of every side, left, right, and center. And that's the difference between news and entertainment.
Absolutely. And that's what everyone needs to be cognizant about, because if you show me a YouTube video of Bill O'Reilly making some outlandish claim about women belonging in the kitchen, or, you know, some study shows that women belong in the kitchen, and you use that as evidence or proof or some factual source of your claim that that's what you believe, okay, you've given me a YouTube video of a guy that's giving his opinion, and a crappy one at that.
Or even better, something like PragerU, which doles itself as some kind of self-help conservative news. I don't even know what the hell PragerU thinks they are, but they do that same kind of crap too.
Yeah. And the same goes for the left. Like, one of the things I hate the most about the left is so many anti-vaxxers are on the left. That's something we got to own. That's one of our conspiracy nut job things. It's this weird thing that's happened. But if an anti-vaxxer shows you a blog that's basically a mommy blog where they're citing a bunch of sources that are essentially like physicians that have lost their license because they keep lying for money, that's not a news source. What we're looking at is legitimate sources that report factual information free of opinion. Now, those are hard to come by. You have to learn how to identify them. A good trick that you need to be aware of, and this goes for all of them, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, anything. If you're reading a news article, look somewhere about the top left. It will tell you if it's an opinion piece or not, because they have to say it's an opinion piece.
Or it'll say editorial.
Or editorial. That is somebody giving you their opinion on a current event or topic. Okay, that is not something that you should be taking as facts. Some of them will cite facts to back up their opinion, but you also have to be careful with those. Does this all seem like a lot of work? Yes, it does. And there's a reason for that, because it is. It is a crying shame in this country that for a person to be informed, they have to spend a significant part of their time deep diving and validating and fact checking this information. It sucks. I hate it, but that's what it takes. That's what we're passionate about. We want to be informed. In fact, there's a great quote that I have from the Atheist Experience. They run out of Texas, I believe. One of their hosts, Matt Dillahunty, has this quote that he always says, and I don't know if he's quoting from someone else or not, but I absolutely love it. It goes, "I want to live my life believing as many true things and as few false things as possible."
Mm.
And it's something I've always taken to heart. And that's where I stand. And I think I've known both Chris and Kay long enough that I believe they live their lives pretty much that way too. We don't care if we are wrong. If we think we're right, we're going to fight for it. Absolutely 100%.
I know what you're talking about. I have no opinions, actually. And the ones I do have are not strong-willed at all.
Oh, no, none at all.
Yeah.
No.
But
like a pool of still water, I am.
if we are shown objective, good evidence that we are wrong about something, we will bite the bullet, admit we're wrong, and change our opinions, because that's where we start from. That's our basis. Our basis is not we only want to believe what we think is true. No, we want to believe what is objectively true. And that's why we're such big proponents of science, because science, despite what many religious people will tell you, is hands down the best way to find out objective facts.
One of my favorite quotes in line with that is Neil deGrasse Tyson, where he said the best thing about science is it's true whether or not you believe it.
Yeah.
And that's what we advocate for on this show. And we want to encourage our listeners, left, right, center, if you agree with us or not, start from there. If your goal is to live your life believing as many true things and as few false things as possible, it's a great place to start. You have to come at things objectively from that point, left, right, or center.
Yep, 100%. And even with that, I would say that even me honestly, all three of us are the three most opinionated people I know. You two tend to be quieter about it, but you two are just as stubborn and as opinionated as I am. But I would have to say, and I think this goes for you two as well, some of my most strongly held beliefs, especially even some of the controversial ones that a lot of people don't agree with me, but the most strong beliefs I have, a lot of times are based on empirical evidence. And in fact, if you can think of something that I strongly believe in, for instance, like I'm an avid outspoken socialist, I did not used to be. That was through learning history in college and pursuing it, learning economic theory, doing lots of reading that isn't on your high school textbooks. Did I finally come to the conclusion this is the right course of action? Now, you can disagree with that, and that's fine. But that was actually a hard pill for me to swallow. I actually used to be very against socialism when I was really young. And that's because empirical fact turned me around. And I think we always have to be willing to do that. We always have to recognize there can be no sacred cows without evidence.
Yeah, 100%. We've given you a resource to kind of check your media sources and see where they fall on this objective line. But there's two others I want to talk about. So the first one I gave you was that chart. The next two are two more independent sites that use their own algorithms to kind of track media bias. The first one is mediabiasfactcheck.com. And again, I'll link to that in the description. The second one is allsides.com. And both of these resources, you go in, you type in your news source, and they'll give you information on that news source, where they align left, right, or center. Just like the chart I was talking about, they'll tell you if they are more prone to conspiracy theories or biased reporting, or if they're more centerline. Yeah. And these are great resources just for finding out if the news source you're currently using is a bad one. And again, they exist on the left and the right too. For as much as we crap on Fox News and places like AON and all those, we got them on the left too. And you got to be careful of that, because there is such a thing as left-wing bias.
I personally find media bias, I've been to both of those sites. I believe that Media Bias Fact Check is a little better than All Sides. Not that I don't think All Sides isn't accurate or good. I believe All Sides is redundant, because I believe anybody who has the introspective ability to go, I should check this on All Sides, is already going to have enough of a barometer to recognize that OAN is bad. Because what All Sides does is All Sides simply brings you, or at least the majority, you can actually type in and search for a news outlet to see where they stand on what All Sides believes their spectrum is. But All Sides just simply gives you perspectives from all sides. It's cool, it's neat, but I feel the worst among us will simply use it to reinforce echo chambers, and the best of us, it's a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid. Like, if you're already going to All Sides, you're probably already not a Fox Newser.
And that's fair, but I'm a big believer in giving as many resources as possible. So
True.
And then the last resource I wanted to give you here, it's a little bit different than what we've talked about so far, but it's a big one and a really good one. Ballotpedia.org. And the reason I want to bring this one up, this thing keeps a record of elected officials, how they voted, upcoming elections, what people's policy positions are. It will give you the verbiage for all upcoming ballots and propositions. Pretty much everything you could ever want as far as information on how to vote, without being told how to vote, is at this site. It gives you the facts. It's cold, hard facts and information. No swing, no bias, no nothing. It's not going to sit there and give you the leftist perspective or the right-wing perspective. It's simply going to lay out the facts and what each side is saying. And it also is a good resource for finding out who's backing these sides. For like propositions and stuff, it will tell you where the money is coming in support and against these propositions. It's an amazing resource. If you've been voting for years, or if you're just finally starting to vote, this is a website you absolutely have to try.
Yeah, Ballotopedia is fantastic. They serve, I think, first of all, I think they serve a hell of a public service. My favorite use of Ballotopedia, because I, just like Matt here, spend too much time going into every single proposition that comes on the ballot.
Yep.
But Ballotopedia does this great thing of showing you exactly who funders are and linking you to them. What I really like using Ballotopedia for is to find out who's funding propositions and legislation. And by doing that, I can immediately tell you where I stand on it, is by who's backing it.
Yeah. During this past election, here in California, we had, Prop 22 that had to do with gig workers?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. That was such a clusterfuck dumpster fire.
Unfortunately, here in California, that passed. I bet you can guess who actually sponsored, wrote, backed, had most of the media concerning essentially taking away rights of the gig worker.
And the most infuriating part was they advertised saying they were on behalf. It was basically like, don't let them take the independence away from these drivers. They advertised as this union type worker advocate group, and it was disgusting.
For those who don't live in California, I just want to clarify. So this prop, essentially what it is, a gig worker by definition is a special classification of worker. Again, it's just capitalism fucking over the working class. Basically what it means is when you're a gig worker, it's kind of like a contracted worker where you don't really have to get paid benefits or be treated with basic human decency. And that's how all of these, Uber drivers and things like that have been classified. This proposition was designed to make it not the case, that they had to be classified as regular workers, meaning they were eligible for benefits.
Or workman's comp insurance.
Yeah, and those things as well. Yeah, all those things. Essentially, Uber, a lot of the Grubhub places and things like Lyft, another one, joined together to fight this. And not only did they have a big money put into the campaign as a whole, but they launched massive propaganda campaigns for their own employees, trying to convince them that this would cause them to lay off a big amount of their employees because they wouldn't be able to afford them. No, and it was a crock, but it worked. And how did they repay all those employees? They just laid off something like 2,000 people in California. Maybe not 2,000, maybe 200, but a massive amount. Like literally the thing they were saying they were trying to stop doing, they did anyway, because capitalism is bullshit. And this is exactly what big corporations and CEOs will do every time. They don't care about their workers.
This is a constant scam brought on not even by just large companies. I used to work for a small company, had a very small number of employees, but it was in an industry that is majority union. So there was talk of unionizing because honestly, this company, we were treated like trash. I mean, not just the underpaid, underinsured, worked terrible hours illegally, forced out of overtime and lunch breaks, and we were even subjected to harassment. I mean, God, the owner of the company would come in at 2 a.m, coked out of his mind and screw things up and yell at people. There was notices on the time clock saying you're committing time fraud if you clock in 1 minute late or whatever. It was terrible. So people finally had a vote to unionize. Before the vote to unionize, the owner went on this giant campaign about how terrible that would be and how we're all a family and he loves us and he loves this company. Together we can make the company great. And if we just stick by him, he's going to address all our concerns and just, and if he doesn't, feel free to take action later, hold him to his word, but he's going to make things better. He hears us loud and clear. Please use. I thought it was a crock. I told everyone it was horseshit. The vote went down. Too many people believed it. voted against unionizing, and 1 month later he sold the company. Which is why he was so against unionizing, is because it would have killed his ability to sell the company. Doesn't matter how large the company is, this ability to take rights and collective action away from workers is everything that capitalism is about.
And again, that leads us back to original point. This is why you always need to be informed, always need to be educated, because one of the things that is the fallout from what we were talking about in the beginning is people generally don't know their rights. They don't know the laws. They don't know what they can and can't do. And so being informed, learning how to spot bullshit, I advocate absolutely for consuming right-wing media. I'm not saying you should do it often. I'm not saying you have to be an avid Fox listener, but the only way you're going to be able to spot the bullshit is to learn what it smells like.
100%.
Learn what the other side is saying, learn what their arguments are, and then go and fact check and research and learn for yourself if what they're saying is true. That's how you get better at this. There is a reason why we all dedicate so much time to this, is because we want to stay informed and we want to be ready. People like the right wingers are loud, and especially now, they're getting more and more militant. And so you have to be able to shut this stuff down before it gets to that point. We in this country have been doing a terrible job of spotting this stuff. It's been coming up and coming to a head for years, even before Trump. As we've said before, Trump was a symptom. He didn't cause this stuff. This stuff has been here for years. And a big reason why it's been allowed to grow is because unchecked bad information has just been spewing forth. And yes, mainstream media news sources absolutely have a part to play in this. But social media is a component too, and we're going to talk about that as well. Before we get into it, I want to talk a little bit more about fact-checking sites.
PolitiFact, baby.
Yeah. So I gave you guys a list of places to check your news sources. Now I want to give you some sites to help you check facts, especially in the political spectrum. The first one, PolitiFact. Amazing site. It fact checks both the left, the right, the center, what politicians say. It'll fact check popular and viral tweets, anything.
And where else can you get a pants on fire scale? Come on.
That's amazing. That's their scale. It's basically true, false, pants on fire.
What I like about it is it's actually kind of nuanced. It'll be like true, mostly true, somewhat true, unverified, somewhat false, mostly false, completely false, pants on fire. Like, I actually like whatever the rating is. They actually give an explanation for it. Like, they'll say, like, this is mostly false. And then they'll actually go into, that's because it has a nugget of truth. This is that nugget of truth with verifiable info. All this is false and conjecture from it. And I like that.
Exactly. In that same vein, there is also factcheck.org. I don't think it's as robust as PolitiFact, but it is just as accurate and just as reliable.
Yeah.
Also in that vein, you have apfactcheck.com. Keep in mind, the news sources that we use the most, because they are consistently the most reliable and most centrist and factual focused, are AP, the Associated Press, Reuters, the BBC, and NPR. Those are my top four.
I was about to say, the way I rank them is BBC is number one, NPR is pretty much tied. BBC is my source mostly for world news. NPR is definitely for American news. And then I will do Reuters and the Associated Press, but like I don't really go to them very often. I kind of go to them as secondary sources. If I see something on BBC or if I see something not being reported on NPR, I will actually go to the AP sites. But typically, I think you really can't go wrong with any of those four.
And the reason I like AP so much is because they're consistently quoted by other news sources like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC will constantly cite AP as their news sources for information. That's why I like it so much.
But a news source quoting another news source is not necessarily always legitimate and correct.
Facts.
So just because you see it on multiple sites does not make it true.
Yep.
And I think that's a really good warning. That's a very good point. Kind of like we were talking about earlier with the White House and Fox News quoting each other. You know, Fox News and the Political and the National Enquirer quoting each other back and forth is not good. It's not reliable. You know, the reason why we suggest the AP4 because it's so quoted is because it has a long history of unbiased work and being quoted by the most reliable sources in the world for decades. That's why the AP is so good. But I think Kay brings up a very good warning is you really need to temper that. That is the reason. It's a long history. It's a precedent of truth-telling, not CNN thought they were right, so they must be. Like, I think that's a very good warning.
Yeah, but and in that same vein, too, you have to remember we have a news media that is built upon and has grown under a capitalist system, meaning what they care about first and foremost, most of these places, is turning a profit. And so one of the pitfalls of that is they always want to be the first one to scoop the story. And that rush can cause all kinds of problems because they'll report on things without having the full information. That was going on constantly with the Capitol riot. And they're very clever about it. They're like, we'll update you as we have more. And most of it is just them giving opinions on very little information because there is none.
Well, and we were actually guilty of this in one case so far, which is the guy who shocked himself in the balls. How many large news stations reported this as being true? And it absolutely wasn't. And then we, in turn, decided that we needed to go ahead and say that. The issue is that a lot of times when these news sources find out that they're wrong, yeah, they put out a correction, but instead of on the first page, it's on page 12, correction. It's never right out in front.
Yeah.
So be leery of those things as well.
Well, and that's a good example of what you were talking about before with personal bias. We all judge Trumpers to be stupid enough that story seemed completely plausible. We just believed it 100% without even fact checking it because of our personal experience. It's absolutely believable to us that a Trumper would be that dumb because they do things like that all the time. Were we wrong? 100%. Should we have fact checked that before we said it? Absolutely.
Well, and we did fact check it. We looked at credible news sources and they all said the same thing. Now they were all happened to be quoting each other.
I saw it on CNN. That was the only major one I saw.
I read it on several news sources, all saying the exact same thing. Just because it's a credible news source doesn't necessarily mean that it's true as well.
Agreed.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, and that's 100% true. But that also ties back to some other things we've said already. This is why you have to be in a position where you're okay with being wrong.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's been psychological studies on this. Like people equate being wrong as a mental equivalent of being stabbed or hurt violently. Like it's the same, or breaking a bone. Like that's what the equivalent is for a lot of people. It's so visceral. You want to reject it out and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't make you lesser. In fact, the person that can admit their fault and correct based on new information is the person that is deserving of respect. 100%.
Yeah, because then you actually get to be right.
You stop being wrong. Imagine that. And again, that's goes back to my philosophy. That is why I want to live my life believing as many true things and as few false things as possible.
All right, now on to untrustworthy sources. We need to get into social media.
Oh, absolutely.
Because this is a place where, unfortunately, a lot of Americans and a lot of people around the world get their news. And how often have we heard someone's right-wing crazy aunt in Milwaukee saying how they heard that Joe Biden and Bill Gates were microchipping masks? And where'd you read that? I read it on the internet. It's true. It's like, well, where? It was on Facebook. It was an article from freedom.eagle. And it's like, well, yeah, exactly. It has become this hive. It has become this hub for horseshit.
Well, and not even that. Sometimes it's not even a news article. The memes that get spread around. Like I've even caught a popular on the left side of this is Occupy Democrats. They send memes out all the time that I see lefties sharing. And most of the time they are either completely factually incorrect or they have misrepresented the facts so much that you might as well not even give a crap.
They're kind of like I fucking love science. It's the same thing. Yeah. It's like they clearly started out with a noble mission and they've just become this awful echo chamber of garbage. That's not exactly. Even that is factually incorrect all the time.
And it's the worst things because it's the kind of thing that on the left it'll feed into that. Oh yeah, that absolutely. I think that's true. And you have to fact check it. You can't take it as fact. And you know what? Nor should you be taking any meme as fact. Just because some dumbass with Photoshop took a quote and put a picture on another picture doesn't make it a reality. Like that's a big problem. Like I've seen that in Facebook debates too, where people will just start throwing up memes as if they suddenly got me and they're serious.
Anybody can make up a quote and put Jeff Bezos' name on it and call it true.
Yeah.
Except that it's not.
One of my favorite memes is a picture of Abraham Lincoln. It says, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet. Abraham Lincoln."
Oh, that's awesome.
It's fantastic. But yeah, social media is becoming, and I don't want to sit here and poop on social media and say it shouldn't exist because it absolutely should. Social media has given us so many wonders. And I'm not talking about just being able to put a dog face filter in Snapchat. I mean, it's done wonderful things. There's a lot of people to share ideas, join groups, find connections. It's great. And you can share credible info. But so many people take crap info as legit because they found it on social media. And of course, this is the Wild West. There is no regulation. And honestly, I don't know how much there should be. Remember when, Robot Zuckerberg had to go before Congress and they were like, people are saying bad things on the internet, as if Mark Zuckerberg invented the internet or trolls. Never will I defend Zuckerberg. He's a son of a bitch. I don't like him at all. He's a Nazi apologist and he's a prick. But it is not his fault the internet sucks.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
And the internet was a terrible place before he ever got there.
And this information that seems to get shared through social media, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Parler, which is now defunct, whether it's Twitter, whatever the platform is, this is where critical thinking barriers are even more important than quote-unquote credible news sources. Credible news sources, you at least expect them to have a modicum of intelligent information, even if it's biased.
Yeah.
You have biased information that's just life. The issue with the social media information is it can just be completely not true. There's no fact checking that goes on. And this is where those things are even more important. Fear of the information being wrong, ignorance of how to check this information, the fact that it backs up your own social biased experiences, that it goes along with that group thinking that you exhibit because you identify as Republican or Democrat or liberal or libertarian or however you identify, it goes along with that. That's how you get stuck in those echo chambers. And Matt was talking about it's good to go out and seek the information given by the opposing view so that you know what's out there. And that'll actually give you a really good idea of whether something that you believe to be true is actually true. Is the left and the right both reporting it the same? Or are they both reporting it very, very different?
Absolutely. But I think one of the things we need to also acknowledge, though, and this is where they have a small amount of culpability, not even blaming them for it. But so remember, these are for profit. Again, you're watching the news and you want the news to be less biased. Like, well, there's a profit motive. They have a motive to keep you engaged and to keep you coming back.
Oh, absolutely.
The crack that it is. And they make this is done through algorithms to make you see things that you will like and that you will want to see more. And so it is designed, it's by very nature, its core design is to lock you into an echo chamber as early as possible.
Well, and I agree.
And that's how you get a lot of the situations that you've had with things like anti-vaxxers. Like before the internet existed, people like this were still around. I think the anti-vaxxer movement was started by that one doctor. I don't remember his name, nor would I repeat it here because he's a piece of shit. But the whole movement was started by this doctor who's since lost his license. The United States has revoked his license. He published a paper while being funded by a competing pharmaceutical company that was totally skewed. The data was completely misrepresented. It was faked, a lot of it, but it came out that the measles vaccine caused autism. It doesn't. It was 100% bullshit. The paper that published it has since rescinded their publication of it and retracted that publication. He can't practice medicine anymore in the United States because he's lost his license, but it doesn't matter because this all happened. And then the internet was coming up around the same time. And all these crazy people that didn't have a voice, that didn't have a platform, all of a sudden they had one and they could find other crazy people. This mom that, reading mommy blogs in her freaking living room over here in Southern California is connected with Hillbilly Jane over there in Arkansas talking about how vaccines cause autism. And then, of course, you got stupid ass Jenny McCarthy who goes on national television to talk about this bullshit and uses her platform to increase it anymore. And then people start looking and all these mommy blogs get popular. And this guy who's been debunked a billion times, it starts becoming famous and doing book tours. And it's this snowball effect that just keeps growing and growing. But it's an issue. And it's actually really relevant right now because there's this big debate going on with all of Facebook censoring. There is a difference between censorship and a violation of your First Amendment rights. We've been skirting this. We are planning to do the different amendments and do deep dives on them. But just as a brief, kind of high level talk here, the First Amendment guarantees that the government, Any government institution cannot infringe on your right to free speech. That does not apply to private companies. It does not also save you from having consequences of your free speech, especially in private companies. Government can't do anything about it, but it doesn't say anything about individuals, people. That's something that needs to be said here. That is not the same thing as censorship. What Facebook is doing is absolutely 100% censorship. And they're not doing it because they're trying to take any kind of moral high road here. They're doing it because Nazis hurt their bottom line, period. And now that the Nazis are complaining loud enough, they're starting to censor left-leaning people because they want this perception of being fair and equal, when it's really not. And that's another thing we're going to talk more about. But I'm sorry, Antifa and Nazis are not the same thing. They are different.
But I heard anti-fascists are the real fascists.
Have there been swaths of people claiming the Antifa banner that have gone and destroyed public property? Absolutely. With Antifa, you're going to get a whole mix of randos. You're going to get anarchists. You're going to get communists. You're going to get anarcho-communists or whatever. That's a whole subset of the left I don't want to even
And
get
you're just going to get progressives as well. There's plenty of people who don't subscribe to those theories, who are pro-government, pro-economy.
That's the point. And this needs to be addressed, is that Antifa has no central structure, no sign-up fees, no any kind of like official standing. It's literally, right now, the three of us could go put on black masks and an Antifa shirt and be like, we're Antifa, and do whatever we want under that banner. And nobody would be able to stop us. There's nobody at the Antifa home office in podunk nowhere where it smells like a zoo that's going to come down and tell us, oh no, you guys aren't representing us right. They're not an organized club. The Klan, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, these are registered clubs. They have procedures for signing up.
They have a central organization.
They have central organizations. They have hierarchy structures. They have leadership. They have all of that stuff. Okay. These things are structurally, they're no different. The average, bowling membership, bowling league, or gun clubs, or things like that. In fact, a lot of those times they're tied together.
But luckily, the bowling league doesn't burn a cross on my front lawn.
Exactly. And so I know that seems like a digression, but the reason I'm bringing it up is because there are marked, legitimate differences between these two types of groups. Seeing one group be out and out racist and marching in Washington, and then seeing another group light a few fires and burn some property, those are two different things. Can we agree that burning property is wrong? Sure, I guess on some level.
No, in a capitalist society where property is given rights over people, I don't believe that destruction of private property is not a valid form of protest.
And that is where Chris, again, that's a position he's coming from with logic. I get he's coming from with it. I can lament some innocent person's property being burned or destroyed. Most of them, if not all of them, are insured, so they're going to get their money back and they're going to eventually be okay. But there's, regardless of the right, wrong, or indifferent, we already as a society know that there's differences in crimes, okay? There's reasons why we have different levels of murder that you can be charged with. There's reasons why we have different levels of crimes that you get punished for, because we recognize there are inherent differences in these crimes. The big thing to keep in mind is that people that are actively trying to disparage an entire group of people for nothing more than the color of their skin is not the same thing as a bunch of random people that went and destroyed a building. It's not the same thing.
Well, and on top of that, there's a big difference between censorship and thought control and a private company saying they don't like what you're saying with their banner and they're removing you and not allowing you free access to them. Because that's the thing.
Yeah.
The same people who are super happy about Colin Kaepernick being fired because he didn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, which is his absolute First Amendment right to do, and it wasn't illegal. The NFL and the teams had a right to be like, you know what? This guy's bad for business. It's unpopular. It makes people sad. We don't want to hire him anymore. Okay. I think that's shitty, but they had a legal right to do so. Now, you can make the case about discrimination, but that's a whole long case, and that would be an uphill battle. The point is, these people were cheering for that. They were so pumped when Hobby Lobby didn't have to provide people health care because that business had a religious right not to. These same people who were so pumped that a bakery could refuse service to a gay couple for making a wedding cake are now the ones who are crying foul that Twitter doesn't let Nazis on anymore.
And that's kind of why I had that big digression there, is because I wanted to draw a distinction between the two. They're not the same. But despite that, because there's now this big pushback on social media from the right, and weirdly enough, a lot of people on the left, like I was surprised at the amount of leftists that want Nazis to have a platform. I really am. It blows me away. That aside, now that they're receiving this pushback in order to appear fair, they're going in, anything they think might be Antifa related, they're blocking. But more than that, even other stuff they've cracked down on. So another good example, and this is, again, I know this is anecdotal, but like there's stories like this everywhere. I've gotten rid of all my social media accounts. The only way I engage on social media is with the public podcast accounts that I have. Now, on my personal Facebook, when I had one, I was constantly debating with right-wingers. And again, it would get heated and I would call them names. I would call the things like stupid, idiot, imbecilic. I would go out there. Those are tame by comparison of some things I used to rage at these people for. Not once would anything happen. On this new social media account that we have for this podcast, when I engage, I am very careful to not go down that rabbit hole. I have actually been put in Facebook jail twice. The first time it was because I was defending another girl that was being called all the names I was talking about before because she was saying that somebody was wrong about the facts of the riots. Like she wasn't even being aggressive towards this person. This right-winger was just going after her. I called him something along the lines of an imbecile who didn't know the difference between, his butt and a hole in the ground. Really tame by comparison to things I used to say in my private account. That banned me.
Yeah, and I used to report Nazis all the time on Facebook. Nothing would happen, and if I said anything about white people, I was put in Facebook jail. That's why I left Facebook.
And the reason this happens is because instead of devoting the massive amount of manpower it would be to have actual people look at these things and review them, they program an algorithm that looks for keywords and phrases, and if it sees it, it knocks it out. And unfortunately, because hate speech is still protected speech in this country, it gets a pass, which I still, to this day, will never understand. But we said all that to say this. Facebook censoring you for violating the conditions that you agreed to use their service is not a violation of your First Amendment rights.
And it's a private service that is free.
And again, I'll go a step further. They give slippery slope arguments. Well, this is the end. This is how it starts. This is how we start to lose our first. No, it's not. There's a Facebook-like service for lefties. It's called Liker. Go to Liker. I've been posting on there, no problem, under the podcast account, no issues. There's MeWe. It's probably the next biggest one after Facebook. A lot of right-wingers are gravitating towards there, but there's a strong progressive presence too. Go to MeWe. Go to Social with 2 L's. There's another one. And the best part, all of these things are the antithesis of Facebook in that they don't want to sell your data. That's their big selling point. They don't track your data. They don't sell it to other companies. They make money by having you purchase, cute little stickers and things that you can buy on the site and things like that. There are options out there for you. You are not being silenced, especially political figures who can literally call up every news source out there and be like, I want to hold a press conference, and they'll get it. Tucker Carlson is literally on a show every night that is accessible to people all over this planet screaming that the right is being censored. It is the most ridiculous argument anyone could possibly make, and they're making it, and the right and the left are buying it. It's nonsense.
I don't think that argument is without merit. Now, let me preface with saying I don't agree with it. 100% I'm with you, Matt. I do not believe this. But both the right and the left have a couple of valid points that I don't think we need to take as gold or as true, but we need to keep in the conversation. So the right is making this argument that social media has evolved into almost a utility.
Mm-hmm.
They have a point. Major social media has a monopoly. Okay. Now, yes, is there MeWe? Is there Liker? Is there these? Of course, but they're tiny. They're insignificant. Yeah. They hold no market share. Nobody's on them.
To give context, I think Facebook's user base is something like at 150 million users, whereas MeWe's got like a paltry 15 million, and I think they're the next biggest one.
And of that 15 million, how many people are ones who activated an account and never went back?
Exactly.
Active users, I'm willing to bet it's even more of a disparity. So they have a point where major social media outlets like Twitter and Facebook have almost become a utility where regular life is indispensable without them. I still disagree, and I think the solution to that is if that's the case, then we need to look into antitrust, but it's a valid point that isn't true, but still has validity to its core, and I think it's good to keep in the conversation. And the left has an opposite, but equally, I think, untrue but valid point, where they say, yes, but if we allow this, the hard left is next. And they're right. But the thing is, the hard left has always been on the list. It's simply that the right wing has joined us. The far left has always been censored and will always been censored. And I'm sorry, the far left is anti-corporate.
Yep.
You cannot expect corporate entities to want to promote an anti-corporate viewpoint. That's going to be the first thing it's censored. It always has been. It always will be. And so to then say, well, I'm scared that we're going to be next. It's like, dude, you were first. And so again, I think it's fair to keep that in the conversation. We should be talking about it, but it is not a true reason to worry about this. Like the FBI. The FBI is evil. I don't like the FBI. The FBI killed Martin Luther King. They're not a good organization. They are terrible. I am cheering that they're rounding up old Nazis who stormed the Capitol.
Yep.
That does not make me a fan of the FBI. Same thing. I'm really happy social media is banning Nazis. That's great. It's a step in the right direction. This does not make me say Twitter and Facebook are good guys. Social media is a den of snakes, and you just need to be prepared for that.
Agreed. I mean, we get passionate and get really into what we're talking about, but ultimately that's the important thing to remember. You have to look at this objectively. It's important to look at the facts, take them in context, and realize where we're at. And I agree with you. The right does have an argument to make that things like Facebook and Twitter have become so ingrained that it's true. They have become practically part of everyday life. Whether or not that's a good thing, I don't think I'm equipped to say. I would probably lean towards not, because of how toxic it can be. Maybe there's a way to fix it. Maybe breaking them up is part of that option. What I get mad about, though, is this happening and people not being cognizant of those facts. Because whereas you and I can have a discussion about this stuff and talk about the different sides, the average person is just, my free speech. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. We're all going to be wound up in the gulags next. And I'm just like I can't deal with that person.
As someone who does keep pace with revolutionaries and hangs out in circles with them and does things with them, if your revolution depends on Facebook and Twitter, it's not a revolution. It's an old man yelling at a cloud. Revolutionary activity is small groups. It's on encrypted chat and it's cellular.
The power in this country and on this planet was, is, and always will be with the people. The only problem we've had is the people refuse to exercise it. But it's changing. Even today, for those of you listening, look what's happening with GameStop and AMC.
GameStop is amazing.
So just for those of you that might not know.
I don't know. I'm curious about this.
Well, this started on Reddit. So basically GameStop stocks have been dropping, their values defunct, and obviously for very obvious reasons, GameStop is not long for this world. What happens is a bunch of hedge funds bet against them, which is what hedge funds do. Hedge funds are just the dirtiest, nastiest, for those of you who don't know, parts of the stock market where basically you're making gambling bets on a company failing. You're betting against the survivability of their stock. And if their stock tanks, you make money because you're basically betting on insurance policies for it.
Well, it's short selling. Basically, what it is you buy the stock at, like, let's say the stock is at 10. You don't actually buy the stock. What you're doing is you're borrowing with the intent to pay back. And what they do is they borrow it and then sell it at $10.
But yeah, so you have short sellers and you have hedge funds that are betting against companies to tank, which is the opposite of what the stock market was designed for. The stock market is supposed to exist as a place where people can invest capital in a business to grow it and own a piece of that wealth that they're helping to create. Hedge funds are completely the antithesis of that when you're betting against a company, and by taking out enough hedge fund, you can actually drop their stock further. The action of a hedge fund going after your company is a self-fulfilling prophecy. These hedge fund managers were going after GameStop, tanking it, and a bunch of people on Reddit, and there was also a Discord server that's been cut down, and Discord says it's for unrelated issues. I highly doubt that.
Yep.
But yeah, there was a Discord server for it, but it started on Reddit, a huge social media hub for stock investors lately, have decided they were going to screw over the hedge and save GameStop. Not to save GameStop, not because they cared about getting ripped off by selling their used games. They just wanted to give the finger to hedge funds. And it worked. Everyone just started buying up this, because remember, the stock has tanked now. Bought up this cheap stock. It's gone from like $33 to like over $350 a share.
Yep.
It's happened so many times. The NYSE has frozen it several times, and they've now put an absolute freeze on it to investigate it. And it's funny that hedge funds can get together to purposely tank a company. That's legal and it's considered standard capitalism. But the second a bunch of private citizens completely legally decide to band together and buy stock, again, there's nothing illegal. There's not even anything unethical about it. It's simply people deciding, I want to help this company and they purchase
Market
stock.
working as it is supposed to work according to all the capitalists.
And as soon as they start tanking powerful and wealthy hedge fund managers, suddenly this has to get stopped.
And it's amazing because billions have been lost by these hedge funds. Billions.
It's beautiful.
And it's all because Joe Schmoes got together and decided to give them the proverbial finger. And it's important because this happens all the time. The issue, of course, is getting everyone to get on the same page. But if 100 million people decided to cancel their Facebook accounts tomorrow, I guarantee you Facebook would completely change the way it does business to get those people back, if it even could. And the reason I love that is because it shows what people can do once they unite. And that's what we need to do. Okay, we need to be united in staying informed. We need to be united in how we vote. We need to stop fighting with each other and start going for what's best for the workers in this country. The problem we've always had is we never unite because we're always too busy fighting amongst ourselves over the scraps being handed down to us.
Social media is a tool. It is no different than a hammer. You can use it to hurt someone. You can use it to build something for someone. It doesn't matter. The internet's a terrible and amazing place. And it's never going to change, and we need to stop expecting it. So rather than having a bunch of 1,000-year-old dinosaurs who can't open a PDF yell at Mark Zuckerberg because the internet's so scary to them, let's just recognize it for what it is. These are private companies who don't care about you or freedom or unhinging freedom. They care about making money. They care about their stock prices. So treat it as such. These are private companies, and if you don't have what they want to hear, you're going to be kicked off, left or right. It doesn't matter. But they are not sources of truth. They are ways to connect, and those connections can take you wherever you decide they take you. So, white guy takeaways. Let's start with you, the good Reverend. What do you think?
I think the biggest issue that we have not looking for more reliable sources for information is convenience. I think that it's all of those things that we said plus convenience. It's so easy to just go to the same old Fox News Network or the same old MSNBC or the same old Facebook or Twitter and read the things that are easy. Because if it's easy, you don't have to think about doing it. Checking that stuff and fact checking and making sure that you get the best and most accurate information is hard and it takes time. And I know that we gave you a whole bunch of resources and that's all great and well and good, but don't take our word for it. Check it out yourself.
Matt, what do you think?
Well, in case any of you guys couldn't tell, this is something I'm pretty passionate about. I think that being well informed is a good step in resolving a lot of the political conflicts that we have. As the good Reverend said, it is a lot of work, but it's work worth doing. Being on the right side of history, bettering yourself, this all comes from being well informed. Please, 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 if you leave here today with taking nothing away but this, always verify your sources, check your facts, and make sure that what information you're regurgitating out into the world is accurate and truthful. Because the best thing you can do is live your life believing as many true things as possible and as few false things as possible. And you, Chrissy Poo, what's your white guy takeaway?
My white guy takeaway is let's remember that polar bears are dying, climate change is real, and some of the biggest truth speakers in our society are currently people like Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, still in exile for speaking truth in an empire of lies. And instead, we're complaining about Nazis not getting a big enough soapbox. If we're going to complain about truth and we're going to complain about censorship, let's look at those who are actually being overrun by those things because they exist. Angela Davis had to live in exile in prison and fight for her own defense. America has no problem censoring and silencing dissenting voices. That is not what this is. The MAGA crowd are idiots, and private companies decided that their idiocy was so staining, it made their corporate logo look bad. And there's a big difference, and we need to have a long talk besides this one podcast about it.
Amen.
All right.
Speaking of social media, Matt, has anybody cared about us this week?
Actually, several people are caring about us. So we do have a couple of shout outs.
I knew my mom would come through.
Yeah, she's great. Love her. Absolutely. That woman is a saint.
True.
The first one is a bit of a repeat, but I wanted to shout him out because They kind of blew up our YouTube channel today. It was Podcast Bozo. They were one of the first ones we shouted out for blowing up our Twitter, and now they're checking us out on YouTube. They have now subscribed to us, and I'm just going to call it, they're officially friends of the show. If you want something a little more lighthearted, a little bit of goofiness and fun, check them out. The next one comes from Instagram, a new follower to the show who reached out to us and had a bit of a disagreement. We thank him right off the bat for being civil with it, so I'm going to read it to you guys and you can respond. So this has to do with our previous episode dealing with economics.
Someone stayed awake to that one, huh?
Yeah, like I said last week, several people. So this is from user Zon Jedi. Hi, I just listened to your podcast on economics and income, and while I agree with some of your comments, I have to call out some factual inaccuracies. The $15 an hour argument isn't that people don't deserve a living wage. It's that those making more than 15 will see their income diminished in relative effort. They implemented it in Ontario, Canada, where I live, and we're okay with it. But I think the other side of the argument is that jobs with higher requirement of skill set should be compensated at a higher rate. The threshold to be a lawyer is higher than a burger flipper, so it's fair that someone who's invested time and effort into a law degree should be compensated higher, which would be hard to argue against. Regarding jobs going away, the skill set needed today is different than post-World War II America. We're an economy based on producing goods. The next progression is that we become a knowledge economy. We produce ideas now. Big fan of the episode, but thought I'd put that in consideration because I didn't hear those arguments covered. My first thought on that is I'm pretty sure we did cover those arguments, didn't we?
Yes, we did cover it. We absolutely covered.
Maybe not in such specificity as as succinctly, but we did definitely cover it.
The $15 an hour movement came out in, was it 2003? We're looking at almost 20 years since that was a living wage. The current living wage in the United States in general is well over $20 an hour.
26. I actually, I checked it out after we got this. And if wages hadn't kept up with inflation, the minimum wage would be about $24, $26 an hour right now.
Yeah. And so the 15 an hour, I believe, is not even a valid fight anymore. That was a loss. We took an L on that one. The current living wage is well over $25 an hour, and that's an average, which means, somebody in the middle of Montana is going to have a great day with it, and people in San Francisco and New York City are still going to starve.
Yeah.
But that's an average, and that's nowhere near the average wages. So we did cover the 15, and I think it's not even a valid fight anymore at this point. We need to abandon.
I agree. And then the next one was this point about the skill sets, which that I know we covered.
Yes. In fact, we had Kay and I had an argument about it.
Kay would agree with you, I think. Chris and I, on the other hand, do not, because again, we haven't heard a good reason. And again, I don't think the one you presented is a good one either, why somebody shouldn't just earn enough to live. This is the communist side of Chris coming out and my more socialist leanings coming out as well. Yes, the person that was a lawyer did go to school for it, but in terms of physical backbreaking labor, the person that's flipping burgers is going to outstrip them every time.
Yeah, and on top of that, I don't think it really matters. I mean, can you imagine a bunch of cavemen sitting around deciding whether or not they should learn how to do agriculture, and someone's like, what's the profit motive?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, a skill set is something that's great, and a skill set can bring you job security, and a skill set can make you do something you love. It's an awesome thing. But no, I actually don't believe a skill set entitles you to more wages. And I don't know anyone who works harder than people who pick fruit for you to eat.
Yeah.
So until they start having Ferraris, I don't want to hear about anybody else having a skill set that earns them more money, because people who work the hardest and are the most essential in this country, we told people who worked food service and retail that they were essential and they couldn't stay home. And even though everyone else was cowering under our covers from COVID, they had to go to work and face danger. And then when they asked for a living wage, we laugh at them and told them to get fucked and get a better job.
Like I said in the last episode, I think the path to getting this fixed starts with making sure everyone earns a living wage, and then slowly equalizing the top with the living wage until everyone's just making enough to live. And, that's where we go. But regardless, thank you for reaching out. As always, we really appreciate it when our listeners do this. If you have any rebuttals, please just send it to us on Instagram. We'll respond right away this time. Thank you for taking the time to let us wait to respond a little bit for this episode.
Yeah. And thanks for interacting with us. We always like hearing from people.
For the rest of you listeners, if you have any disagreements with what we said today, if you have any additional information you want to add on top of it, give us a comment. Tell us what you think. We'll absolutely respond to you either through comment sections or maybe shout out on one of our future podcasts.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us again on a Monday. It's good to be here with you. We're glad you're here. Thanks for letting us in your ear holes every Monday. Please join us again next week. We'll be around. Until then, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Because remember, kids, the revolution is you.